Been a while since gun owners have had an opportunity quite like this. With a Republican trifecta in the federal government, NAGR has crafted a plan to restore the Second Amendment. We're calling it the Make America Armed Again program. Before we get into the details, you can click the link in the description below, read all of our program, as well as sign the petition to put pressure on members of Congress to restore the Second Amendment. We start off with the National Constitutional Carry Bill sponsored by Congressman Thomas Massie, H.R. 9534. Now, it seeks to extend the right of all law-abiding Americans to carry legally in all 50 states. Now, currently, 29 states have similar laws in place, and we've been involved in passing those. But this bill is really the only thing that truly allows it on a nationwide basis. Next, we want to pass the Shush Act to deregulate suppressors. The Silencers Helping Us Save Hearing Act, Senate 4825 by Senator Mike Lee, proposes to deregulate suppressors at the federal level, removing them from restrictions under the NFA and the NICS system. It's well past time to lift regulations on this common firearm safety device and turn them into nothing, a mail-order accessory. The next step, abolish the ATF. The idea of abolishing the ATF is not really new. It was once proposed over a decade ago by former Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner. Established initially as a taxing authority within the Department of Treasury, the ATF's mission has expanded over the years to align with the agenda of the gun control advocates. With the new administration coming on board and establishing a DOJ program, Department of Government Efficiency, ATF's got to be on the chopping block. President Trump and Congress can start right now, though, by firing anti-gun ATF Director Steve Dettelbach on day one, and frankly, putting Brandon Herrera in there, and then reducing the ATF's budget to pre-Obama levels, cutting at least $1 billion for fiscal year 2025. Then we're asking them to overturn and defund Biden's executive gun controls. The Biden administration has weaponized the DOJ and the ATF to undermine the Second Amendment rights of all Americans. The incoming administration and Congress must act immediately, using every available tool, including executive actions, budgetary control legislation, the Administrative Procedures Act, and the Congressional Review Act, everything. We want to repeal the ATF's engaged in the business rule. This rule was really a clear end run around Congress. Attempts to impose universal gun registration because the Biden administration lacked the votes to pass it legislatively. Again, end runs. We want to rescind the ATF's bans on homemade firearms, pistol braces, and forced reset triggers. Federal courts have repeatedly ruled that the ATF overstepped their bounds in its authority with these arbitrary bans, which can no longer stand now that the Supreme Court has overturned the Chevron defense. Next, we want to eliminate Biden's Office of Gun Violence Prevention and reinstate the Dickey Amendment. The government does not need another taxpayer-funded gun control think tank. The Trump administration should abolish it immediately, and Congress could reinstate the prohibition on using federal funds to promote gun control. Then we want to direct the Justice Department not to defend any gun control law or regulation in court. The executive branch must respect the Supreme Court's Bruin ruling by instructing the DOJ and U.S. attorneys not to defend any law, rule, or policy that contradicts the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment. Next, we want to end federal red flag gun confiscation support. The federal government has no business funding gun confiscation schemes that trample on due process in the Second Amendment. Red flag laws are a dangerous infringement that empowers the government to seize firearms without proper legal proceedings. Congress must act now to cut off any federal support for these unconstitutional programs. Next, we want to repeal the red flag justice assistance grants authorized under the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Taxpayer dollars should not fund states that violate Americans' rights. Next, pass the Federal Agent Responsibility Act to hold federal agents accountable and prevent them from participating in these unconstitutional gun grabs. We want to destroy the ATF's illegal gun registries. The ATF has overstepped its bounds over and over again, blatantly ignoring federal law to build a massive gun registry that threatens the privacy and rights of law-abiding Americans. Congress must take immediate action to dismantle these illegal databases and put an end to the ATF's attempts to monitor lawful gun ownership. In 2022, the ATF admitted it maintains a database containing more than 920 million firearms purchase records of both digital and hard copies. This is a clear violation of federal law, and these records must be destroyed to protect Americans from unconstitutional surveillance. We want to end multi-gun purchase reporting. Now, following the disastrous Operation Fast and Furious, the ATF imposed an illegal rule requiring FFLs, manufacturers, and importers in just 4 states to report lawful multiple gun sales to the same person. This backdoor gun registry lacks statutory authority. We want to end unconstitutional name dumps into the NICS prohibited persons list. For too long, the rights of veterans and law-abiding Americans have been stripped away without due process based on bureaucratic decisions and unjust reporting practices. It's time to end this unconstitutional overreach and restore gun rights to those who have been wrongfully placed on the NICS list. Pass the Protecting Gun Rights and Due Process Act to ensure that no one is placed on a federal no-guns list without a proper judicial process. The authority to remove Second Amendment rights should lie solely with the courts, not with unelected boards, commissions, or any other non-judicial entities. Next, we want to repeal the Sporting Purpose Clause and firearms import bans. The Sporting Purpose Clause in the Gun Control Act of 1968 imposes an arbitrary test on the Second Amendment that has no basis in the Constitution and contradicts the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. This clause was first exploited in 1989 to ban the importation of lawful firearms. Since then, the ATF has repeatedly used it as a loophole to block the imports of semi-automatic rifles and components like barrels, all without congressional approval. Next, this is a big one, repeal the federal gun tax. It's targeted taxes on firearms and ammunition, and it's nothing less than a modern-day poll tax on Americans exercising their Second Amendment rights. The Pittman-Robertson Act's 11% excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment unfairly singles out lawful gun owners and is a blatant infringement on our rights. Such taxes which don't apply to other commodities are unconstitutional and must be repealed immediately. Americans should not have to pay extra money to exercise their fundamental right to own any weapon they please. And finally, repeal the 1934 NFA, the 1968 GCA, and the Hughes Amendment of 1989. The Supreme Court's Bruin decision made it clear. Any gun control must align with the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment as it was understood at the time of our founding fathers. 20th century gun control laws fail that test. It's time to correct these unconstitutional mistakes. The National Firearms Act, the Gun Control Act, and the Hughes Amendment to restore and preserve the Second Amendment in its fullest form for future generations. Conservatives must roll back these infringements and reaffirm that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed in the 21st century. That's our Making America Armed Again program. Now, if you support this, click the link below in the description and sign that petition. That'll put heat on your members of Congress, pressure against the people who are going to vote on this, and give them a framework of what we need to do to reclaim our Second Amendment rights.